What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the next part of the Spotify app series. In the last two parts, we finally got signing in set up. And in this part, we're going to start hitting some of the other APIs to get some functionality working. So let's go ahead and jump into the Xcode project. Let me select my simulator, go ahead and give it a run. I think we should still be signed in from the end of the last video. Take a chance to destroy the like button down below for the YouTube algorithm, and let's get into it. So I've got the Spotify API referenced opened up here, and I figured the first thing we probably want to start by doing is getting a user's profile. So I'm going to go ahead and come down here and go to the user profile endpoint. And for some reason, some of these links on the left don't really work. I think they're broken, which is kind of annoying. So here it is. Here's the user profile. We want to get the current user's profile. And what's really great about these Swagger-like docs that Spotify supplies is it kind of tells you like what it wants, right? It wants an authorization header. It'll tell you the response. And then for some of these other APIs, it tells you what query parameters and what other things it wants in the request. So that all said, we're signed in here. That means we have a valid access token. And we have this API caller Swift file that we created. So let's go ahead and start writing out a class that's responsible for making all of our API calls. So I'm going to say API caller is going to be a final class. We're going to use a shared instance of it. So we're going to create a static shared. I'm going to privatize the initializer like that. And the first thing we're going to say is public func get current user profile. And this is going to have a completion block with an escaping block, and it's going to return to us, let's say, a results. And if we succeed, we would have gotten a profile, which I think we created a model for. I think we called it, or maybe we didn't actually create a model for it. Let me take a look here. Looks like we have not created, we created a user profile file, but I don't think we put anything in here. So let's go ahead and create a user profile just like that. And this is what we expect to get back from this API call. So we're going to say the results upon success gives us a user profile. Otherwise, it gives us an error. And this whole block returns void, just like that. So the other thing you might recall from the other video is in Auth Manager, we have two primary functions in here, one to exchange a code for an access token, and this other one here to refresh if needed. So what we always want to go ahead and do, I'm actually going to rename this function. What we want to go ahead and do is whenever we make an API call, we're going to say, with the latest token, and we're going to check right before we make any API call and make sure that the token is in fact the latest one. And the reason we're going to do that is we don't want the token to accidentally expire, like 2 seconds after we make an API call, because that's a pretty nitty-gritty edge case, but it could happen. So let's go ahead and change refresh if needed to I guess we don't actually need to even change this. What we could, I guess, do is we could create another function on here. We can say public func with valid token. And this token is going to, this function is going to return to us an escaping block. And this escaping block, if I can spell it correctly, will give us the access token back. That's valid, otherwise void. So here, what I'm going to go ahead and say is we are going to say, let's see, guard, or if should refresh token, we are going to know that we need to refresh. Otherwise, what we can go ahead and do is we could return the current token. So we can say else if let token token equals the access token. In here, we're going to say completion token, just like that. And in this case, what we're going to go ahead and do is, of course, call this refresh if needed. So we're going to say refresh if needed. And the completion is going to return to us a Boolean. So we're going to say success. And we are going to say if success, we're going to once again basically do this whole thing. So I'm going to copy it and put it in right there. If success and we're able to get our token, and we want to make sure we say self optional so we don't cause a memory leak here since it's a closure. If we're able to both get a token and it's successful, let me go ahead and combine these blocks. We can unwrap it as well as it succeeded. We can once again call completion and pass the token back. Now, one thing that might be interesting that you might think of is, well, what happens if we call the API and the token refresh is in progress? So if that happens to be the case, what we're going to go ahead and do is we are going to basically collect this block, right, the call, and we're going to store it. And once the token has been refreshed, then we're going to go ahead and call all of those blocks. So let me show you what I mean. So here in refresh if needed, if we start refreshing the token, which is basically done right about over here after we've created the request, we can say refreshing token is true. And a refreshing token is just going to be a bool that we're going to keep all the way up here in this class privately. We'll say private var refreshing token by default is false. And we're going to say it's true. So what we can also do up here is we can guard and make sure that we're not already refreshing so we don't do it again. And if we're not refreshing, then we can come down and proceed. And let's see. So once we have finished refreshing the token, regardless of if we succeeded or not, we're going to come in here and we are going to say self.refreshing token is now false again. And the interesting thing that we care about here is in this block, what I'm going to say is guard not refreshing. And if we are refreshing, we'll come into this else block. So what I'm going to say is append the completion to be executed once the refreshing has completed. So we're going to create it. I'm going to create it right here. We're going to create a private var on refresh blocks. And this is going to be a array of escaping closures. So I'm just going to grab this whole guy and drop it him in like that. And what we can now do is we can append in here the completion block. So I can say append, and we can simply drop in completion. Now you might be wondering, what the heck is the point of doing this whole kind of exercise of, if we're not refreshing, go ahead and continue. And if we are refreshing, we're just gonna, append the block. The reason we're doing that is because we don't want to redundantly refresh. So in refresh if needed, because we know it is refreshing, what we're going to now come in here and do is once the refresh has completed and we have successfully actually come in here and got the token, what we could do is we could say, let's see, we can say self optional on refresh blocks for each. And in each of these, we can execute the block and we can actually pass back the access token just like that. And once we have executed each of those blocks, so we can come in here and then say is, let's go ahead and remove everything in here because we don't want to redundantly call one of the blocks that we've saved. So hopefully that was a good explanation and you guys were able to follow. Now we can go ahead and use this with valid token in our API caller. So I'm going to write a comment here, supplies valid token to be used with API calls. So this will obfuscate all the logic of going and checking if we need to refresh or not for every API call. So here I can now say Auth Manager shared with valid token, and now this is going to give us a token to us. And from here we can go ahead and start creating the request. Now you'll notice, maybe not yet, but you'll eventually notice that every single request, for the most part, needs to have this authorization header. And we don't want to redundantly create, that request in each of the API call functions. So I'm going to create a private function in here. What that's going to do is it's going to basically create a generic request that every API call will be kind of building on top of. So we're going to say create request, which is going to return to us a URL request. And essentially in here, we're going to say var request is a URL request, just like that. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to move this with valid token business into here. And instead of actually returning the request, we're going to need to make it a completion block. And the reason is because we already have a closure inside of here, so it's going to be asynchronous. So I'm going to say completion colon, this is going to be escaping. And this block is going to return to us a URL request and void. And now what we can say is request, and we want to set a header here. So let's see, we've got a request created. Let's see what this is complaining about. Let me go ahead and hit Command B. Let's see what this error is all about here. Missing argument, it's saying. So it wants a URL basically. So we're gonna go ahead and say create request with URL, and we're gonna pass in a URL into this, just like that. And we can go ahead and make that optional to make our lives easier of unwrapping it every time. So we'll say guard let API URL is URL. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and return here. So we can pass in this API URL right there. And then what we can say is we can set a value for a header. And like I said here, we are going to need this authorization bit for almost every single one of our requests. So we're just going to do this whole setup one time, and this is going to simplify our lives for all the other places that we're going to need it. So there's an HTTP header, and this is going to be our bearer token, and we're just going to stick in the token that we get from the valid token call. So there is our request kind of being put together. It's very simplest form. Then we can finally call completion and pass back the request. Now, what I'm going to also do, just for sake of simplicity, is we're going to introduce an enum in here, and this is going to be called HTTP method. Now, if you're familiar with kind of API calls, you can have different calls like get and post. So we're going to say this is get, and it also has post in here. They are going to have a raw value of type string, which is why we're going to put string there. And now what you can also do is we can say create request with URL. Type is going to be HTTP method. And you can further, make this request generic by saying the HTTP method is going to be the type.raw value. I'm also going to say that the timeout time is going to be 30 seconds. And that should be good to go. So let's go ahead and line break this to clean it up a little bit. Bear with me. All right. So now what we can do in this guy is we can say create request. And this is going to return basically the request, but we need to supply the URL in here, which I'll do in a moment. The type for this get profile will be a get, and the completion is basically going to return to us the request, not the actual API call yet. We have not done that yet. So here we're going to say this returns to us a request. We'll call it a base request just to be simpler. And now we need to get the URL. So let's come back here and let's take a look. So this is calling api.spotify.com/v1/me. So let's go ahead and copy this. Let's talk about some good, more good practices. So we can see that we're going to have a base URL. So I'm going to go ahead and create a constant struct here, and I'm going to call this base API URL. And let's go ahead and paste this in. And the base URL is going to be everything up to v1, just like that. And now what we can go ahead and do in this guy is we can say constants dot that, and then we can just append it in the path that we want, which is going to be /me. And this is going to create the request for us. And you can see here that it's telling us it's a get request. And this is the response that we expect to receive. So we're going to want a codable object to match it. So right now in here, what I'm going to now do is basically just execute this request. So we can go ahead and say let task is a URL session shared, and we're going to say data task with request and completion. So the one that we want is this one right here. This one's going to be request, base request rather, and it's going to return to us via completion data, a response, which we don't care about, and a error. And here we want to basically take that and try to, convert it to what we want. So we're going to say guard let data equals data, error is nil. And if either of those, don't hold up, we're going to say that we failed. So we're going to be calling completion with a failure in here. If you're wondering where this failure comes from, it's because we are passing back on our completion a result type, which can take a success or a failure, or an error rather, but we need to create some custom errors. So I'm going to create that right up here. We're going to call this an API error, and it's going to be of type error. And I'm going to say case failed to get data. And now what we can do here is in this completion block, we can say completion, failure, API error, fail to get data, just like that. And if we successfully do get data, what we can go ahead and do is convert it to JSON via Codable. If something goes wrong, we're going to catch the error and, of course, send it back via the completion. And in this case, we're going to say the result is, first, I'm just going to say JSON serialization, JSON object to make sure we're getting something back for this given data here. So I'm going to go ahead and say data. And the options, we can go ahead and say this is allow fragments, just like that. And let's just go ahead and print out said results. So let's go to one of our view controllers and try calling this API. So we currently have a couple of view controllers and other, one of them being profile view controller. So what we are going to do is we are going to call the API in here, and we're going to use this view controller. So I'm just going to stick it in view.load. The title is going to be profile, and I'm going to go ahead and say API caller shared. And there's only one function on here. We're going to say get current user profile. And this is going to give us a result. And the result has needs to be switched upon because it has a success with the model that we want back. We're just going to say break for now, as well as the failure, which is a error, and we can just print out error.localized description from it. Let's see what's going on. We're going to say error. Let's see model. Let me see what I've got going on. We're not using that there. We can print out error.localized description is what I'm looking for, but autocomplete is not cooperating. It's because that's supposed to be a colon, not a semicolon. Let's try that one more time. There it is, localized description. And let's go ahead and push this view controller on. So we have a couple errors here. Let's fix up this one. So here we are getting an error that we have this task, but we never actually called it. That's a good gotcha right there that I just missed myself. And let's see if we have anything else that's an issue. We have this error. Let's see what this is all about. Call can throw, but we did not include the keyword try, which is also important. So let's bring up try right there. Let's go ahead and run our app. So if we run our app, you'll notice we don't have any way to push this profile. So I'm going to add a little gear up here as a bar button item in the home screen of our app. And when we tap on it, we're going to push on the profile. Realistically, we should probably go to our settings and then the profile, but we're just going to do the profile for now for the sake of kind of getting through this quicker. So we're going to say in the home view controller, the navigation item dot right bar button item is a UI bar button item. Let's try that one more time. Bar button item. We're going to create it with a title. Rather, instead of a title, let's use something a little nicer. Let's use an image and a style. So I'm going to go ahead and say the image is a UI image, system name of gear, a style of done, a target of self, and a action of did tap settings, which I know we're going to show the profile, but we're eventually going to change it to settings. So I'm just going to call it the right thing from the beginning. And here we're just going to create that function. And all I'm going to do in here is say let VC is going to be profile view controller. And we're in a navigation controller, so we can now say push the VC with an animation. We're also going to go ahead and give this a title of profile. And I'm also going to go ahead and make sure its large title display mode is set to never. Let's go ahead and give this a run. And let's see what we get printed out in our console down here when we tap on that button that's now at the top right. So we're going to tap on it, and boom, we get our JSON printing out down here. We can see all the information from my current user, so the country, my display name, my email address, explicit content filters, external URLs. We also has a total follower count, which nobody follows me because I guess I have no friends. Let's see, what else do we have in here? It has images, which is pretty cool. We probably want to get the image out of this. So I kind of want to throw this into a browser and see if it resolves to my image, because this will be pretty cool. And let's see, a type as a user, and it also tells me the product, and this user is subscribed to premium. I subscribe to premium for the sake of this series, so we can play around with it. So let's go ahead and make sure this image is showing up. Let's see. All right, so cool. There is my profile picture as well. So now we just need to render out our UI. But before we do that, let's go ahead and convert this into a codable model. Because right now we're just dumping out all the JSON, which is not too helpful. So I'm going to copy this whole block here. We're going to open up our models. We're going to come to user profile. And I'm just going to drop it right down there. And let's go ahead and just create a model that basically mirrors all of this. I am just going to comment it out so it doesn't yell at me. So let's see, we have a country in here, which is presumably a string. We also have a display name, string. We have an email, string. And I like to start deleting these as I go through them so I know which ones I've done. Let's see, explicit content. So it looks like this is a dictionary of strings and numbers. So let's get rid of my antivirus pop-up that loves to make an appearance. So let's see, this one is going to be this, and it is a dictionary with strings and I guess integers is what that should be. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. External URLs. Sure, why not? Let's go ahead and save this as well. Looks like this is a dictionary as well of string and string. Kind of weird that they did it that way. Let's continue along. So followers. Okay, this is also a dictionary, but it's a dictionary of, I guess this would be classified as a string. So let's go ahead and say followers is a dictionary with string and something that's codable. We'll see if we can get away with that. This might actually be optional. Let's see what this is yelling at us about because I spelled string wrong. Let's continue along. All right, so href here, we don't really need this. This is telling us, the API URL to this user, but we might need the user ID actually. That's pretty darn important because a lot of the API calls ask for the user ID that you want to target. So let's go ahead and save that. And then images is pretty important too. So what I'm going to do is, let's see, we don't want the type here, I guess, or the URL. This URL is a deep link URL in case you care about that. But we do want the product. So I'm going to say let's product is going to be a string as well. And finally, let me grab images. So it looks like images is pointing to an array of image objects. So I'm going to create another model called user image. I'm going to call it codable. And in here, we are going to have a height, which I can't tell if that's optional or a string. So we're just going to stick with a string, or we can actually just ignore the height. It's probably smarter. What we care about is a URL mainly. So I'm just going to say this has a URL in it, which is of type string. And images here is going to be a property, and this is going to point to an array of this user image model, just like that. And we can get rid of all of this stuff now. And back in our API caller, we can try to convert the data that we get back to our appropriate model now. So right here, instead of saying JSON object for the data, I'm going to go ahead and delete that and say Json Decoder. Whoops, we want to spell that correctly. It's pretty important. And we are going to say right here, decode this model from this data. And what I'm also going to do here is print out this error in case one does occur, because if we're not able to successfully, code out the error or code the data, it is going to throw an error. So it looks like we have a bunch of errors here. So let's see what the heck I did. Well, first of all, we spelled that totally wrong. So let's make that a string. And let's see, we have some more errors. Let's see what's going on. So this is JSON decoder, decode user profile.self from data. Let's see what this is saying. User profile conforms to decodable. This should be decodable. Let's go back and see what happened. Let's see. All right, where is our model? Here it is, user profile. We never said codable, duh. So let's say codable here. And let's see why this isn't codable. It's probably yelling about, let's see, user image is codable. And this is codable. Let's see what thing isn't codable in this model. User profile does not conform to protocol, codable, or decodable. So I have a hunch that it's probably complaining about this one. So let's get rid of that. And it looks like it seems to work. So we can just keep followers omitted for now, and we'll bring them back if we need it. I was just being lazy because I didn't want to make another model. So let's go ahead and create this. And it looks like we didn't get any errors. So that means we successfully were able to go and get the data and convert it to our model. So now that we have the data coming back, let's do something more appropriate for our UI. So when we tap on this, we want to show settings. And in settings, we're going to have a option to, view the current user's profile. So let's go ahead and create that. So back in our home view controller, instead of, instantiating our profile view controller here, we're going to say this is settings view controller. This is going to be settings. We're going to go ahead and push that on. Let's go ahead and build out our settings real quick, which is going to be nothing more than a pretty basic table view. So I'm going to go ahead and create a table view in here. But before we do that, we're going to say the title here is going to be settings. The background color is going to be a system background. And let's go ahead and add in a table view here. We're going to say table view is a UI table view. And this will basically be a table view created in a anonymous closure. Nothing too fancy here. If you're not familiar with this kind of approach to create objects with this anonymous closure, I've got a video on this channel talking you guys through how to do that. So go ahead and watch that if it confuses you at all. And I've also got a bunch of videos on table views. So no worries there if you're not comfortable with table views either. We're going to register a pretty vanilla table view cell here, no custom cells just yet. We're going to go ahead and say view.add subview, the table view. We're going to assign the data source here. We are also going to assign this guy's delegates. We are going to say view did layout subviews, super view did layout subviews. I really can't type today apparently. Bear with me. Table view frame is going to be view.bounds, get rid of that extra line break. And then, of course, we want to conform to the appropriate protocols on this class. So we're going to say UI table view delegate as well as UI table view data source. All right, these guys should go away, but it's going to yell now about some data source functions we need to bring in. So let's bring those in. So I'm going to make a mark comment. This is strictly for just code organization. If you're not familiar with kind of what it is, if you've seen it and you're curious of what it is, we're going to say number of sections. Number of sections. I'm just going to return 1 for now. Number of rows. Let's go ahead and return 1 as well. Cell for row at index path. We're going to go ahead and create a cell and dequeue it with our given ID and index path. All right, let's go ahead and return cell right there. We're also going to say its text label.text is just foo at the moment. And we're going to want to do something when the user taps on a cell. So we're going to say did select cell at index path. We're going to unhighlight the cell first. So we're going to say deselect at index path with an animation. And then we want to basically call handler for cell. So now we are going to create appropriate models for our settings here. So what I like to do is create a model for the section, and there's going to be a sub model for the row, basically. So you can call it an option or row or whatever you want. And you can put it in models or in view models. It's really up to you. So let's create a new file here. And I'm just going to call this settings models, just like that. And if we think about it, every single section is going to have a model. So it's going to have a section. It's going to have its own title. And it's going to have an array of options, which is going to be an array of option models. Now, every option is going to, of course, be a model. It's going to have its own text of type string. We can also say it's going to have a handler for the given option. So this is just going to be nothing more than a closure that takes in nothing and returns nothing. And now we can go ahead and do back in our settings view controller is we can, let's come back down here. We can come back down in here and we can create a array that's going to hold our sections. So we're going to say private var sections is going to be an array of sections, just like that. And up here, we're going to say configure models. All right, let's create this function right down here, func configure models. And we just want to basically append in all the models that we want. So we're actually going to have 2 sections to start with. So I'm going to append a section, and this is going to be profile for the title. And the option, we're just going to have one option here at the moment, which is going to have a title of view your profile with a given handler. And this is simply going to be self.view profile. I used self optional here because we are going to add weak self in here so we don't cause a memory leak. And we are also going to create this view profile function, I'm kind of just putting functions all over the place right now. If you can take the time to organize, you should. I'm just doing it for the sake of kind of time. And we're also going to want to make sure we do this on the main thread, since we are going to be, in this function, creating the profile view controller and pushing it. So we're going to say vc.title is going to be profile. I'm going to say navigation controller.push vc animated true. And we're going to once again say the navigation item, large display type is going to be never. And let's add in one more here, one more section. You might be wondering what it's going to be. We're actually going to build out the functionality to sign out. So I'm going to say this is going to be account. And I'm going to do this in case we do need to sign out and change our scopes at some point. And it's going to be annoying if we don't. So I'm going to say sign out here. And when we tap it, we are going to say sign out tapped. All right. I'm not going to implement it in this video, but I'll at least stub it out here for one of the latter videos. So there is our sign out function that's private, looking pretty good. Now what we need to do is change number of sections to sections.count. Number of rows is going to be sections with the end section index options.count. The self row, we're going to get the model out of sections. So this will be sections index path dot section, and then options index path dot row. And instead of saying foo here, we can say model dot title. And I'm actually going to copy this whole thing to get the model out. Whoops, let's copy this top line up here and drop it into did select row. And we can now say model dot handler and go ahead and call it. And I know we've typed out a bunch of code. Bear with me here before we run it in a moment. We're also going to say title for section. And the function that we want is title for header in section. And what we can do is we can get the section here by just saying that this is sections. Let's go ahead and call model, since that's what a parameter is called. And this is the nth section. We can return model.title. And I think we should be in business. So let's go ahead and give this a run. Fingers crossed we don't have any errors. All right. I don't like that this gear is blue either. I'm not going to fuss with it in this video, but if we tap it, we now have a table. We can tap on view profile and it's showing our profile. You saw there was a weird animation there. We pushed it. That's because there's no background color on this here. If I put it into light mode, you'll see it. And tapping on sign out, nothing is happening either, which is expected. So let's go build out our profile a little bit right now with our UI, since we have the data, and that'll kind of wrap up the profile there. So let's jump into our view controllers again, open up other, let me close up all of those other things, and let's find our profile view controller. So what we are going to do here is let's move this into its own function of private func fetch profile. All right, we're going to say fetch profile. We're going to say background color is going to be system background. And once we've got our profile, we basically want to go ahead and render it. So if we have an error, what I'm going to go ahead and do is we're just going to show an alert, or we could just show a label saying that something went wrong. So what we first want to do is take this whole thing and the switch statement and put it in dispatch queue onto the main thread, since we're going to be calling some UI update functions. We're going to also say weak self. Here we're going to say self update UI with model. And let's go ahead and create that function here. We're going to say private func update UI with model, and the model type is going to be user profile. That is not what we want. User profile, this guy right here. And then we also want a function here. Instead of just printing out the error, I'm going to say self.failed to get profile. All right, let's go ahead and put that one down here. And let's see what else we are going to need. So we could, let's do this one first, failed to get profile. It's pretty simple. All I'm going to do here is create a label, and that label is going to have some text saying, we could say the frame is 0 actually by default. We're going to have some text in here saying failed to load profile. Let's go ahead and say label size to fit. We'll also say label dot text color is going to be a secondary label color, which is just a lighter label. We'll go ahead and add it onto the view. And we're going to go ahead and say label.center. Whoops, label, spell that right. Label.center is view.center. So if we go ahead and I just call this function instead of anything else here, you'll see what's actually going to happen. So if I give this a run, you'll see that'll just go and add that label onto the screen. So there is our label in case something fails to load. So it looks pretty good. And now we just actually want to render out the real profile. So let's talk about what we want to use to show the profile, what type of UI component. So in the profile, we have a thing like country, the display name, an email. We also have an ID, product, and images. And there's some other stuff in here as well. But I think what's probably suitable to show this profile is a table view. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is we are going to create a table view on here. We'll say private let table view, UI table view. And let's go ahead and just create it kind of vanilla to start off with, and we can customize it as we need to. So we're going to return the table view here. All right, here we're going to go ahead and say register a UI table view cell. Nothing fancy quite yet. So let's go ahead and conform to UI table view cell data source, as well as UI table view cell delegate. Let's try that one more time. All right, table view delegate. And let's go ahead and add this. So the other thing I'm going to say is by default, this table view will be hidden because we might, not get data. So we don't want to show, anything table view related. So let's go ahead and add this onto our view. We'll say add the table in view did layout subviews, which we have not overridden yet. We are going to set a frame to this to be the entirety of the screen. So view.bounds. We also want to not forget to set the delegate and the data source. And here, what we basically want to do is we're going to say the table view is hidden is false. We are going to configure table models. And then we're going to say table view reload data. Now we want to also, of course, implement the table function. So I'm going to say mark table view. Number of rows, we're just going to return 1 for a quick moment. So we're going to say cell for row at index path, cell for row at index path. And we're basically going to dequeue a cell just like we did for our settings screen. So we're going to dequeue a reusable cell with an ID of cell. And for the index path, there is our cell that we've returned. We don't want this cell to have a selection style, so we're going to say none. Now, I'm not introducing a custom cell here quite yet. We might need to. I already kind of have a hunch. So let's just go ahead and set a text of foo. And let's see. So now we basically want to take the data that we have inside of user profile and convert it into something we can show in our cells here. So let's keep it simple since this video has gotten a little longer, and in the latter video, we'll go ahead and tweak it. So we'll say here models is nothing more than an array of strings, just for simplicity's sake. And in here, I'm going to go ahead and say models.append, let's say full name, and this is going to be model dot, what do we call it, display name. Let's go ahead and copy and paste this a few times. We'll say email address is going to be email. There's an ID in here also. We'll say user ID. What else is in here? Let's see. We have an ID, we have images, we have product. We'll have this be plan, and that'll be premium. But we also want to show the image. So let's make sure these models are first working for these rows, and then we'll go ahead and work with the image as well. Because I don't know about you guys, but once you bring an image in, that's how you know that you've made it and your app is actually pretty cool. So let's go ahead and give this a run once we've updated our model calls there. We're going to go to settings, we're going to go to profile, and what the heck is going on? Looks like we're getting an error. Let me see if we're printing something. We are not printing any error, so what the heck is going on? So we're saying update UI, failed to get profile. Let me go ahead and say profile error here. Let's try that one more time. All right, let me go ahead and click on that. user profile. Let's see what we've got printed down here. Huh. We definitely are not getting an, oh, we are getting an error. What am I talking about? The data couldn't be read because it isn't in the correct format. Interesting. Okay, so let's go to our managers, our API caller, and let's see what is going on. So we have data here. We're saying Json Decoder, Decoder user profile dot self from data. So let's see, something must be off here. So we're printing out the error in here, I believe, in the catch statement. So let's try that one more time. Let's go to settings and and we hit our breakpoint here. So that's not good. Let's try hitting the pause button and let's see what I screwed up. So definitely botched something. So let me go ahead and first thing I noticed is we never actually called completion with our result here, which we should be doing if it was working. But what I'm going to first do here is we are going to go back to JSON serialization, JSON object with data options. We'll say allowing fragments. Let's give that a run and make sure that we're still getting our JSON back. I think it just screwed up the codable. So yeah, so that looks to be correct because we are getting the JSON back. Let's come back to our models. Let's come back to our user profile. Let's go through this one by one. So country, we've said that's a string. Display name, we said that's a string. Email, let me make sure I spelled that correctly. That's a string. Let's get rid of all of this other jazz and let's see if we're able to get codable data back out of it. So let's go back to the API caller and let me hit undo, undo. And here, all right. Now we're just gonna print out the result. So we should be printing out our model. So let's see what's going on. We have an error here. It's because we commented that out. So let's comment that out as well. Bear with me. I like leaving these types of errors in the videos because I think it's helpful to see, me screw up the video myself. All right, so we're getting the model out now. So something in our codable model is a problem. So let's come back to it. Let's start uncommenting some stuff. So let's see, not this one. We want to go to user profile. Let's see, so ID should be fine. Product should be fine as well. And I think images should be fine as well. I have a feeling that one of these is a problem. So let's go ahead and run that. Let's go to user profile and okay, we have user profile. So looking pretty good. Let's uncomment one of these and let's see what we get here. So we're saying this is a string and a string. All right, let's go ahead and hit this, hit this. All right, we still have a user profile. So that means this guy is a culprit. So explicit content, I'm saying this is a string and a integer. So let's go ahead and say this is a string and a bool because it's one or the other. It might also be optional. So we might have to, take care of that. So let's go ahead and hit that. Now it's working. Okay, so I see. So it was representing, the values in this dictionary as string and Boolean, not string and integer. So there's a quick little example of debugging live and in action. So if you run into that error, now you know. So let's go ahead and uncomment the completion and get rid of that print statement there. Let's give this a run. Oh, actually, I think I forgot one more thing. So let's come back to our profile and let's uncomment these two model appends. 25th time the charm. Let's go ahead and go to our profile and there is our data. So looking pretty good. We could work on our styling a little bit, but we have our data coming out. Let's add the profile picture and then we'll wrap up this video. I know it's gotten pretty long. So the first thing we're gonna do is actually bring in a dependency. Downloading images yourself is pretty easy, but caching them is kind of a pain. So we are gonna bring in a dependency via Cocoapods. So go ahead and close the project, open up your terminal. You want to cd into wherever you have saved the project. We're going to do a pod init to initialize Cocoapods. Then we are going to open up the pod file, and I am going to bring in a couple dependencies. We really only need one for the image downloading, and you might know it already. It is called SD Web Image. It's very popular. It's very lightweight. I'm also going to bring in a few other ones here. We'll bring in Apparator, which allows us to show a nice little rating prompt. I'm also going to bring in Firebase Analytics for if we get a chance to, hook up analytics here. And we don't really need anything else. I'm going to get rid of this fourth one. Analytics from Firebase just helps us track various things across the app in case you want to. Go ahead and close text edit and run pod install. And bear with it a few seconds while it installs all the dependencies it needs and all of its dependencies. It should not take more than 10, 15 seconds. And once you've gone ahead and installed it, you can open up your project folder again. And now you're going to have an XD workspace. So open that up. And you can open up the project here. Let me expand the window so we have a little more room to work. If the window decides to expand, there it goes. Let's try that one more time. All right, there it goes. Let's select our simulator from the list. I don't know why it defaults to the iPod Touch because no one is using an iPod Touch anymore. Let's go ahead and hit run. And we should, everything should be compiling, but let's go back to our view controller for our profile. We have the image URL now in the model. So all we really need to do is just render it onto the user's interface. So if we think about how we can do that, right now we're using a table view to show the other data that they have. The only thing we're going to do is we are going to add a table header at the top of this, and in the middle of it, there's going to be an image. So let's go ahead and do that. So here, I'm just going to say create. Let me go ahead and pause the simulator so my computer fan doesn't decide to get loud. We're going to say create table header with URL. And this URL is going to be model.images.first .url, which is a string, and it'll be an optional. Let's go ahead and create this function right here. It'll be private. I'm going to say with URL. Let's call it string because that's really what it is. And we're going to want to convert this string to a URL. So here we're going to say guard let URL is, well, first let's say guard let URL string is string. And we're going to say let URL is a URL from that string, and we'll say URL string. I also want to say return. And now we can go ahead and at the top here, I'm going to import SD web image. All right, bear with it. It decides to sometimes not work. There it is, SD web image. And let's come back to this function. And now we just need to create a table header. So I'm going to say let header view is going to be a UI view. We're going to give it a nice frame, CG rect. And let's see, 0, 0. We'll say this is view dot width for the width. And the height, we'll say this is view dot width over, I don't know, it's divided by, let's say, 1.5. We're going to go ahead and say the table has a table header view called now header view. And in this header view, we just want to go ahead and add an image. So first I'm going to say image size. We want this to be nicely positioned in the center of the header view. This is going to be a CG float, and it'll be header view dot height over 2. And now we're going to go ahead and create an image view. So we'll say image view is going to be a UI image view with the frame CG rect 0, 0 image size. Let's go ahead and add this to our header view. We'll say add subview image view. I want to say image view dot center is going to be header view dot center. And we'll see if that calculation is right. And let's see, let's finally set the image. We'll say image view SD set image with a given URL, which is URL. Completion is nil. And I'm also going to go ahead and say on this image view that the content mode is scale aspect fit. So our image doesn't look any like weird or anything. Or we can say fill too. That's acceptable as well. Let's go ahead and give this a run and let's see if it shows up. I have a feeling our frame calculation is wrong, but we'll find out in just a moment. Cool, there is our image in the dead center of our profile header. So if we go there, you'll see it doesn't download again because it cached it. I don't like the edges here, so let's go ahead and apply a corner radius on this. So what we're going to say is we're going to take this image size here, and adding a corner radius is pretty simple. We're going to say image view, and we're going to say layer masks to bounds is true. This is image view layer corner radius is going to be image size divided by 2. That's just a basic calculation to get a perfectly rounded circle. And let's go ahead and go to our profile, and you'll see just like that, we have a circle with a nice little border as well. So here's your profile in a nutshell. Nothing too fancy. We took a look at calling the API, building some UI. In the next several videos, we're going to build out a lot more of the UI, call more of their APIs, et cetera, et cetera. I'm also going to fix the tint color up here because it's going to drive me insane. But that's it. So if you enjoyed the video, definitely don't forget to destroy the like button down below. Comment any suggestions, feedback, concerns, if you ran into any bugs. I know I went through this fairly quickly. The reason I did is because this video is long enough already. Feel free to pause and go back and look at everything that I did. And of course, if you're new to the channel and like iOS Swift, don't forget to hit subscribe to stick around and hit the bell icon if you want to be notified whenever a new video goes up, which is every single day. So thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.